Hey everybody, in today's video I'm going to be showing you how to reload from start to finish for beginners. These will be all beginner steps in this video. Make it real simple and easy for you. Let's get started. Alright guys, so the first step is you got to clean your brass. There's several ways to do this, from various different tumblers, media tumblers, water tumblers, stainless steel media tumblers. When you're just starting out, you could even clean them by hand with soap and water and small brushes and let them dry real good. I used a media tumbler. My brass is already clean, so we're going to move on to the next step. Now that your brass is cleaned and you got it laid out in your tray to reload, you're going to grab your sizing die. I'm assuming you're brand new, and if you're brand new, these are probably brand new dies that you have here. When you first open them up, the first thing you're going to need to do is you're going to need to take these dies apart, pull the decapping pin, or this, in this case, the bullet seating pin, decapping pin, pull them out, get some brake clean, wipe them down real good. They come with grease in them. You want to get that out of there before you reload shells. Once you've done that, you're going to grab your sizing die first. You'll know it's your sizing die because it'll have this little decapping pin sticking out right here, where your bullet seating die does not. So now that we've got our sizing die here, we're going to jump over to the press and I'll show you how to set it up. Alright, so we come to our press. To set this die up is going to be really simple. This is just the basic beginner way to set them up, and it'll work just fine for you just starting out. So all you're going to do is you're going to run your ram all the way up, and you're going to screw in your sizing die. You'll just screw it in until you just feel it touch that ram. You don't want to try to twist tight once you touch it, just right up until you feel it touch. You're going to bring your ram back down. You're going to screw this in about a quarter of a turn more. Now run your ram back up, and if it's a ram like mine with a cam over effect, you'll feel a nice clean cam over effect. If it's a dead stop, you'll feel a real positive engagement. I leave my ram pushed up against it to kind of hold it, and then you run your lock ring down just to hold it tight. Take your Allen head, tighten that lock ring down so it can't move on you, and boom, now your sizing die is all set up. Now that your sizing die is set up, you're going to need the right shell holder. It'll look like this. It's just going to snap into your press. You'll also use it sometimes in your trimming tool and your priming tool. Snaps in at the bottom of the ram here. You'll feel just a nice clean snap. Now you're good. You need a different shell holder for most cartridges. Some of them will kind of overlap. We're doing 223, so I got the one out for 223. Next, you're going to take your brass. You have to put case lube on it. I recommend Hornady One Shot. It's a dry lube, so it means you don't have to re-clean your brass after you put this on before you put powder in them. So I recommend Hornady One Shot. If you use a roll-on lube, you'll have to repeat step one and clean your brass again. So all we're going to do, we're going to take this, we're going to stick it in our shell holder. We're going to run the ram up. The first couple shells, make sure they're good and lubed and just have a good feel for it. If it feels really hard going in, it might get stuck, and you don't want to get a stuck case. Push it down, your primer will come out. Okay, we resized our first brass. Now I recommend getting a little device like this. This is basically just a case gauge. Basically, if you drop your shell in and it's flush on the top, it doesn't stick out, and it ain't sticking out the bottom, it means that your length and your size is all right, and this will chamber fine in a rifle. If you don't have one of these yet, which I do recommend getting, basically all you got here is your calipers. I know 223, the maximum length is 1.760 inches, so I'll put my calipers on it, and 1.64 or 1.748, and I know this is good. It fit in my shell, my case gauge, so we're moving on to the next one. And I'm just going to do 5 for this video to show you how to do it. You run each one up. Like I said, if you start sticking it in and it feels like it's got a lot of resistance, you're probably going to get a stuck case. You don't want one, so make sure you're kind of feeling for that. You'll have some resistance, but it shouldn't be a lot. And I'll just run another one of these through my case gauge, make sure my die didn't move. I know these are all good. These are first fired. None of them are going to be too long. I recommend measuring every single one if you're using calipers when you're just starting out getting a feel for it. All right, guys, on to the next step. Your next step is if your max case overall length was over what your book says it should be. In 223, like I said, 1.760. None of mine is, so I'm not going to have to trim it. But if yours was over that number, you would have to trim it. There's lots of different style trimmers. This one, basically, you put your shell in, you have an Allen hole here, you'll screw this in as your stop, and basically whatever length you want, you'll just keep adjusting this till you get the length you want and trim it. Mine don't need trim, so we're going to move on to chamfer, deburring, and primer pocket cleaning. Alright, next in your brass prep list is to chamfer, deburr, and clean the primer pockets. How you do that, this would be a chamfer and deburring tool. This is an inside chamfer. Basically what happens is when you trim these, they'll get some debris built up on the lip. You'll have to remove that. So this will do the inside here, and that is your chamfer. Then you want to do the outside. It doesn't take much. If you sit here and do a lot, you'll actually shorten your case. You just want to do enough to get those burrs off. This is your deburr. Do that a few times. Now if you look in here, you can see there's no debris. You don't want to make it sharp, just enough to where you can easily put a bullet in there and you don't have any debris build up. Once you've done that, this is a primer pocket reamer. This is actually for the military crimp on 223 brass. This is a hand tool version. So I just want to show you that, because if you're a beginner, this is probably what you got to start with. Then you get that primer pocket nice and clean. I did this one to show you. I'm going to go ahead and use my electric deal over here, do the other 4, and then we'll move on to the next step. Now that all our brass prep is done, we have to prime these so they're ready to reload here. So how this goes, this is a hand priming tool. There are a few other types of hand priming. I really like these. Lots of people do. If you got a different priming setup, go ahead and use that. I'm going to show you how to use a hand priming tool. So this right here is your shell holder. Like I said earlier, that would have came off your press. In this case, I've got 2, so I don't have to keep removing them all the time. Basically what you're going to do, you're going to pull this tray out and you're going to open the top here. With the top open, you're going to grab your primers. I'm only doing 5. I'm going to try to just dump 5. It probably won't work out. The best way to dump them, I find, is put this over the top, turn it upside down, raise up here. Okay, now my primers are in. I want to be very specific here. You need the primers that your book tells you for what you're reloading. In 223, these are small rifle primers, and other rifle like a 308, 270, you'd use large rifle primers, and in Magnum calibers you would use large rifle Magnum primers. But don't just quote me on that. Check your book for that. Once you got these in, you got to get them all facing the right way. Basically how you do that is you're just going to shake this tray and they just kind of magically stand up. You want the tops facing up because that's what's going to go into your brass here, and that's what's going to ignite your powder. So once you got this done, I'm going to close the top, if I can get it here, and I just lock this down so nothing can spill out while I'm doing this. You're going to insert it back into your hand priming tool. Now sometimes what happens with these hand priming tools is if you leave this open, you feed too many at a time and then they get bound up. So after I get one, I close this again so no more can spill in. Now when you see your primers there, you go ahead and you take your shell, you insert it into the shell holder. Now you're going to point this away from your face, because every once in a while here primers might go off on you and you don't want that. So once you get it in, it shouldn't feel like there's a lot of resistance. It should just be a decent clean pull, release, boom, my primer's in. Now you want to look for, you don't want your primer protruding out the back of your shell, otherwise that could result in slam fires and semi-automatics and some other issues. It should be seated nice and clean, just like a factory shell would come out. So now that I've done the one, I'm going to go ahead and do these other 4 here, and we'll move on to the next step. Alright, so we're going to start putting powder in shells. First, you always, every time you do this, you need to zero out your scale. You need to make sure that this is, in this case, this is a beam scale. If it was a digital scale, it's a lot easier to zero. You just hit a button. You want to zero it with whatever tray you're going to be putting your powder in when you measure it. That way it's not picking the weight of that up. So with both pieces on 0, this is your gauge for your beam. The middle one is zeroed, and the top one and the bottom one would be I believe 0.5 grains difference if they were hitting those. So to zero your scale, you're just going to twist this little foot in the back here on a beam scale until you see it hit 0. And the camera angle kind of makes it hard to see. That's zeroed there. Once you have that done, you're ready to start doing powder. I want to also mention this scale has already been verified that it's 0 is a true 0, that it's on. You do that using check weights. Basically, you get something that you know the confirmed weight of it. You put it in here after it's been zeroed, and then you'd slide this over to whatever that check weight was supposed to be. Let's say it was 50 grains, and if it's still on 0 when you put 50 grains in, your scale is verified and you know it's going to give you an accurate reading for your powder. So moving on to the next step. Alright, so for this video I'm going to be using my powder drop to drop my loads close to what I need them to be, and then I'll trickle up to it. If you didn't have a powder drop, you just take like a little itty bitty scoop a little bit of powder. You'll get kind of a feel for what the right amount is, and then trickle up to it. Basically how this powder drop works, you open the top, dump your powder in after you've verified it's the correct powder for the load you want to build for the specific caliber you're doing. You do that all through your reloading book. Then it's got 2 different adjustments here. This is for dropping a bigger amount of powder. They also have one for a smaller amount of powder. Typically that's used for pistol cartridges. Then this is your lock ring. There's no Allen head on it, you just loosen it. Then this is how you adjust how much powder is flowing through here. I've already got it set up to drop about 25.8 grains for the load I'm doing here. That's how you'd adjust it if you had one. If not, using a little scoop and a trickler is fine also. Alright, so how this process goes is basically if you were just hand scooping it in, you'd scoop it in to your little pan here until you got it pretty close to where you wanted it. Then you would powder trickle up to it. I'm using a powder drop, so I'm just going to take my pan up here, do my powder drop, set it on my scale. Then I'm going to back up so I can see here and check. And it dropped right about 28 or 25.8 grains roughly. So now that I got it there, I'm going to use my powder trickler here, and I'm just going to trickle up until my scale hits 0, which is where I'm at. Now that I've got the right powder charge I want, you're going to take your little powder funnel. This is what I use here. You'll stick it on your shell. You'll confirm that it's on there flat so you're not spilling a bunch of it. It's a little bit harder with 223 because the mouths are so small. With your funnel straight, you're just going to pour this in to your first shell, and that one's done. Now you're going to do this process for every single cartridge you have here, and then double check, triple check, shine a light, make sure each one's got powder in it, and then we'll move on to the next step. Alright, with all your powder in your case, now it's time to reach back into your die box, and you're going to grab your crimping and your seating die, and I'll show you how that sets up. Basically what we're going to do is we're going to take another piece of brass that's been sized, been trimmed to the length you want, chamfered, deburred, and we're just not going to prime it. We're going to leave a primer out of this. This is going to be a dummy round. So how you're going to set this up, back your lock ring off, alright, so you have room to play here. Now, put a couple screws in. You're going to take this dummy round, stick it in your shell holder. You're going to run your ram all the way up. With your ram all the way up, you are going to screw this seating die down until you feel it make contact with that brass. Once you feel it make contact, you are going to back this die off about 1 full turn just to ensure it's not touching, because what that's doing, that is your crimp. You're feeling where it would begin to start crimping your brass onto a bullet. We are not going to crimp in this video. I had another video covering kind of how to crimp. That's basically the reloading on and rumors and misconceptions video I made. I don't like crimping. If you know what that is, lots of people don't do it. Now we're gonna loosen this nut here, bring this up so we got room to play, and we're gonna bring this dummy round back down. Now what you're gonna do, you're gonna get your bullets, whatever ones you're using for this dummy round. You'll need to make a dummy round every time you switch bullets that you're using, and if you switch your trim to length, if you are going to crimp, because basically if not every shell is trimmed to exactly the same length, you're going to get variance in your crimps. So once you get this bullet, you're just going to set it on top of your shell here, and you're going to just kind of guess with your seating stem to begin. You're going to run it up, run your seating stem down until you feel it touch, back it off, run your seating stem down a little bit more, bring it back in. Now you're going to pull it out and you're going to want to measure this. Like I can clearly see here that this is not all the way seated. You're going to refer to your book. You're going to find out what your cartridge max overall length is for 223. It's 2.260 inches. So right now we are at 2.4, so we got to go in quite a bit. So we're going to put this bullet back on. We're going to run your seating stem down quite a bit more. I'm going to go ahead and press it down. I'm going to check my length. And now you're going to repeat this process until you get it to the length you want. I don't recommend when you're starting out to load right up to max length, just because the bullets might vary in length slightly, and because they don't actually seat from right at the point. It's a circular, it seats down in the middle, and your ogive, basically the round spot of your bullet where it's going to seat, might vary in length, and then this might be too long, it might not fit in a clip. So I'm going to run this down, get this dummy round built, then we'll go from there. Alright, once you get the seating depth you want on your dummy round, you're going to want to put a little bit of tape at the bottom of this. Make sure you write down the seating depth that you had and everything, and then you can use this to set up your seating stem when you switch back to these bullets. Next time it makes it a lot quicker, a lot easier. All you do is put this in, run the ram up, and twist your seating stem until you felt it make contact, and then you back it off, you reload a shell, check the length, and if it's all good, you're fine. If not, you might need to make just a fine adjustment there. I'm going to show you how you would set up to crimp real quick. Basically, you'd back your seating stem off now that you have a set length, so you know it's not going to move that bullet. You'd run your ram back up, and you'd screw your die body down until you felt it make contact with the case neck. Then you back your shell out, you twist it about 1/8 of a turn more. That'd give you a very light crimp. Like I said earlier, if you do this, you need to make sure all your cartridge or case lengths are trimmed to the exact same length, otherwise your crimps are going to vary from shell to shell. Then once you did that and you had the crimp you wanted, you'd lock it in, you'd run this back up, you'd set your seating stem down until it touched the top of the bullet, and your seating die would be set up. We're not crimping, so I got this backed off where it can't crimp. Now we're going to go ahead and reload some shells. So basically what you do here, you verify that you got powder in here. Always verify. You don't want to get just a primer fire, you get a bullet jammed in your barrel. Then what would happen is that you might not realize it, and then the next shot, boom, there goes your barrel because there was a bullet stuck in your barrel. You seat the bullet on here after you verify there's powder. You run it up, press your bullet in. Once you've done that, you're going to get your calipers and you're going to measure, and you're going to confirm that this is the same length as your dummy round. Yeah, so this is measuring 2.250. Remember, the max cartridge overall length for 223 was 2.260. So I'm just loading a tenth of a thousandth off of that just for some variance in the bullet length. If you had a base to ogive measurer, which would actually not measure the cartridge from the tip and measure it from your ogive, that's a lot more accurate. I do have one, but for this video, for just starting out, I just want to show you how this is done. And you check that. I recommend, especially just starting out, go ahead and check your length of every single shell. Check, double check, triple check, always check, take lots of measurements. You'll never have an issue if you take the time to do it right the first time. Next one seated at 2.246. So basically what that's telling me is that this bullet varied slightly in length, 0.04 of an inch. Not the end of the world because it's not over my max cartridge overall length. These are just target rounds, you know, shooting prairie dogs, jackrabbits, just planking rounds for a 223. So it's not that big a deal to me as long as they run flawlessly through my gun and they don't get hung up in the magazine. This one's back to 2.250. Basically, you do the same process for every single cartridge, and then boom, you got some cartridges reloaded. Go out, shoot, and have fun. And thanks guys for watching this video. I hope you found it helpful. If you got any questions, comments, please leave them. I'll do my best to get back to you. I appreciate it, guys.